Hi there, and welcome to The Different Reviewers, a presentation by Solutions IRB. My name is Cassidy Nosecable, and I'm pretty new to the IRB world as well, so we'll be learning this together. Before we discuss the different kinds of reviewers, let's talk about why we even have different reviewers. Now, as an IRB, our job is to uphold the Code of Federal Regulations and make sure that your study is as prepared as possible to follow those regulations. Ultimately, an IRB's goal is to protect human participants in research. So by having multiple reviewers, we can have multiple sets of eyes on your study. And that's really important to get those fresh eyes looking at your study. As a researcher, you spend so much time involved in the study up close and personal that it can be kind of easy to lose focus of some of those regulations that come into play. And that's why we have multiple reviewers, so that you can have lots of eyes on your study, making sure that you've covered all your bases. Here at Solutions IRB, we utilize three different reviewers primarily. First, there's a pre-reviewer, then a primary reviewer, and in some cases you might have a final admin reviewer. The pre-reviewer is the first set of IRB eyes that come onto a study. Really, all the pre-reviewer's doing is kind of going through a checklist. We're looking to ensure that you've filled out your application completely, you've included all the required documents we need. We'll check those documents to make sure that they've got all the required elements. So, for example, in your consent form, we'll make sure that you're not missing any important pieces in the consent form. We'll make sure that your study team has all the proper credentials uploaded for them, so human subjects training, CVs and resumes, that type of thing. And our pre-reviewers consist of board members. You're going to notice a theme throughout this that pretty much all of our reviewers are board members. After the pre-reviewer has taken a look at your study and made sure that you've kind of hit all those checkboxes and included everything you need to include, then a primary reviewer comes into play. And this person is going to do a deep dive into your study. They're going to be the one that's really looking at the study as a whole and making sure that, the entire study is going to work for all those rules and regulations. They're going to be assessing the risks and benefits for your participants. They're going to really look at the methodology and the study design behind your research. They're going to deeply review the qualifications of the study team and make sure that, if you're doing a study on psychology, that you've got maybe a psychologist on there or someone that's qualified to be working with participants in such a way. And they're also going to still review all that supporting documentation that the pre-reviewer looked at before, but they're going to be looking at it with those kind of a little bit more scrutiny than the pre-reviewer would. They are, again, just going to make sure that all the elements of your study as a whole work together to uphold those required standards that we have to have. Now, if your study is a clinical study, so anything to do with, the medical field, it will also be reviewed by a physician to ensure that all medical practices and standards are upheld. So that's the only kind of study where you might end up with actually 4 reviewers looking at it. So you'll get a pre-reviewer, a primary reviewer, a physician reviewer, and then a final admin reviewer, which we'll talk about next. The final admin reviewer is only used for full board studies. So if your study is exempt or expedited, it's actually just going to go through a pre-reviewer and then a primary reviewer. Then our IRB chair will look it over and approve it. Whereas full board studies, they'll go through a pre-reviewer, primary reviewer, and then come see the final admin reviewer. Now, this person is usually the same person that was your pre-reviewer back at the beginning. And really, as a final admin reviewer, all they're doing is making sure that all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed, everything still makes sense after you've gone through a few rounds of revisions with your previous reviewers. So they are kind of taking care of the little things, the minute, simple errors that might pop up during that revision process. Because even if your errors are really tiny, let's say you have a phone number listed wrong in your consent form, by the time your study makes it to the board, even something as simple as that can slow down that approval process. So by having this final admin reviewer in here, we're actually able to make the process a lot more streamlined, both for you and for us as the IRB. We want to make sure that by the time your study goes to the full board, there's no little problems that might cause it to slow down. Now, I know that as somebody using an IRB, you want it to go as fast as possible. And it might seem like throwing in this extra reviewer in here will slow down the process, but typically by the time the final admin reviewer is assigned, you're still going to have to wait a couple days before there's a board meeting. So the final admin reviewer is able to review it in that couple day gap from the time your primary reviewer has signed off and the board actually looks at it. So really, even though it is an extra reviewer, oftentimes they aren't adding any extra time to your review process, which is pretty handy. And again, they're still going to make sure that by the time you get to the board, your study's nice and clean and all the details are taken care of. Now, before you submit your study, you're going to want to try and submit it into the review category that you think best fits. And if once we start reviewing it, we realize it's maybe not quite in the right category, we'll let you know and we'll work with you to make sure that it is in the right category. Now, there are 3 different levels of review. Like I mentioned, both exempt and expedited study are actually only looked at by our pre-reviewers and then a primary reviewer. Once both of those reviewers have signed off on it, it will then go to our IRB chair who will approve the study. Full board studies are, like it says in the name, looked at by the board. This is after they've gone through a pre-reviewer, a primary reviewer, and then a final admin reviewer. And once it's gone through all 3 of those reviewers, they've signed off on it, then it goes to a 5-member board where they will vote to either approve it with conditions, table it, or deny the study. Again, if this is a clinical study, a physician will also review it before it gets to the board meeting, just to make sure you're following all the medical regulations you need to. Now, if you aren't sure which category that you might fit in, we do have a few other videos out there that might help you narrow this down. Feel free to check out the link for that. Thank you so much for joining us today, and if you'd like more information, feel free to visit our website at www.solutionsirb.com, or if you have questions, you can email us at correspondence@solutionsirb.com. Thanks again.